Whoops, I hit the wrong button. Nothing like getting the draft special off to a roaring start. How about that? Bobby Swofford, Blair Cartwright with you. Welcome to the hospitality room. This is our annual mock draft. Mr. Swofford, are you excited?
I'm excited. I'm not at the beach like you are apparently, but I'm pumped about it.
Yes. Well, I'm actually on the beach here at Spain. My daughter was here last weekend, and she sends me all these pictures, and I'm like, well, I might as well just throw them up as a background because Lord
Cool.
knows
I
I'll
like
never
it.
get there. Yeah, it's funny.
Yeah.
She'll send me these pictures, and I'm like on a dirt field in Gravette calling 10U softball. So it's nuts. But mock draft time. Have you done your homework? We've got the running clock.
I have.
We're gonna roll probably the world's fastest mock draft, I would think. And I don't, let me ask you if you had the same issue I did. Okay, you prepare for it and you kind of have a
Hmm.
feeling, and then you still have time before said draft, mock draft. And
Yeah.
then you hear more information, information overload, you start thinking. And I wonder if that's maybe the problem, or not a problem, but an issue why we don't necessarily see draft picks pan out because you just, well, one, you expect them to contribute right away, which
Hmm.
fair or not fair, but there's so much overthinking involved.
There is, and because you can talk yourself into or out of selecting a certain player, you may have a gut instinct, which more times than not is going to be right, especially these experts who watch football. And I know we got
Mm-hmm.
a 32-minute clock. We're thinking a minute for each pick, but of course, some of those won't take nearly as long. But you can kind of convince yourself, okay, maybe this he projects better for our system, or he doesn't fit well as a personnel standpoint. So you can talk yourself in and out of picks, and I think that's why the downtime really from mid-January to now is so stressful for these front offices because they talk themselves in circles.
Yes, I would totally agree with that. And so let's get right to the draft.
So I have odds. Blair has evens. That was
Yes,
predetermined, and so that means I have the
yes.
number one pick in the draft, which we have known since essentially the day the season ended, and the Chicago Bears ended up with the number one pick that they're going to take, and I'm going to go ahead and take Caleb Williams, quarterback from USC.
Awesome. All right. If you want to follow along, or we recommend the NFL mock draft database simulation. And so Caleb Williams has been drafted. So that means that the Washington Commanders, I finally said it right, are on the clock. Hmm. I think obviously they're in the market for quarterback. There's been a lot of rumblings. I'm going to say Jane Daniels is the pick at number two. Oh, I guess I should push that up before I actually do it. So that means you're on the clock with your beloved New England Patriots, and this is a quandary of a position.
Yeah, it really is, and because New England needs a quarterback, you kind of wonder, okay, who are they going to take here? I think the Patriots really want Jaden Daniels. I think that's the quarterback that they would really want to go for. I don't know that they're married to the idea of taking Drake May. I've
Mm-hmm.
almost talked myself into circles. I think what happens with New England, and we're not doing trades in our mock draft. We're just
Mm-hmm.
going to draft it down the board, 1 through 32. I really think New England trades from 3 to 6 here. I think they trade back with the Giants. They pick up an additional second round pick. The Giants would take Drake May. And then, kind of depending on how everything else falls at 4 and 5, I also see New England trading down again and really stockpiling some picks. And I think they would take Michael Penix, the quarterback from Washington,
Mm.
in that teen range. But because of the sake of this draft, I think the Patriots take Drake May, the quarterback from North
Okay.
Carolina.
So we take Mr. Drake May off the board, and that will bring us to the Cardinals, who need obviously receiver. And I mean, good. This is the interesting pick. I was reading some stuff, pardon me, in the Athletic last night. Some people think Neighbors is going to be the better pro long
Mm-hmm.
term than Harrison. You got three receivers. Man, I don't know that you can go wrong with either one. So I will say Mr. Neighbors goes to, oh, I'm in the wrong one, Arizona, which puts the Chargers on the clock and
Yeah.
Mr. Harbaugh.
Yeah, and this is another team I think that would really trade out. because they obviously lost a lot, but they also lost all their receivers. Mike Williams signs with the Jets. They trade Keenan Allen. They used a number one draft pick on Quentin Johnson last year from TCU, and he really didn't pan out. The way this falls, though, I think they trade out. But obviously, if Marvin Harrison's sitting there at 5, Jim Harbaugh with Justin Herbert at quarterback is licking his chops. Marvin Harrison to the Chargers.
Yeah, I like that pick. And I think one thing too, with Harbaugh having been at Michigan of late, he knows he's going to know the draft board better than anybody for over the next 3 years. So we'll see how that pans out. So that puts the Giants on the clock. There's been, I mean, good Lord, they have so many needs. They obviously need a quarterback, but I don't know that J.J. McCarthy is on number 8. I would go Joe Alt because I think offensive line, you can get the skill guys later, but if you don't have the line, skill guys are irrelevant.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I think they either trade up to take Drake May or they take an offensive lineman. I think Joe Alt's a really good pick there. And in Tennessee at 7, that's another prime example. They've got a lot of holes. I think they need offensive line help as well. Of course, they've got a young quarterback in Levis who they think might be their future. We haven't talked any defense yet, and the grumble is there may only be 6 or maybe even 7 defensive players taken in the first rounds. A lot of holes on defense for them, a lot of holes on the offensive line. You look at the best available, you maybe question, okay, who do we want, who we need? I think they go Terry and Arnold, the cornerback from Alabama, try to shore up that secondary, fix the defense a little bit, especially in a division now where you got to play the Texans twice, who have revamped their offense. Really good quarterback, really good receivers now, especially with Stephon Diggs. They've got to shore up that secondary if they want a chance.
Yeah, no, I would agree. That's a good move, and that puts now the Falcons, who've got a new quarterback in Kirk Cousins. Adunze just makes too much sense, I think, right there. Yeah. Give him some weapons to throw to. Can't go wrong.
Yeah, and so now we got the Bears at 9, and the Bears have already come out and said they're open to trading this pick. I don't expect Chicago to make the 9th pick. I think they would trade back, maybe stockpile some future picks, maybe some day 2 or day 3 picks. But since we're keeping it here, I really think that Turner may not make it this deep. I think he's probably thought to be the best edge rusher. So if I'm the Bears, they've made a lot of additions to their offense. Obviously, Caleb Williams. I'll go Dallas Turner, the best edge rusher in the draft, outside linebacker from Alabama.
I like it. I like it a lot. I think that's a good pick. And that puts, the drama-filled Jets. Aaron Rodgers, will he last more than a series? Boy, Brock Bowers just sitting. I mean, that just makes too much sense. Draft a tight end to let him throw to. So I'm going to say the Jets take Mr. Bowers. And that puts the Vikings.
I don't see there's any way. Yeah, I don't see there's any way that Bowers falls past 10 because that's exactly what the Jets need.
Yeah.
That's a really good pick. Minnesota, that's one of the teams I think that could very well trade up to get their quarterback. Luckily, in our mock draft, they didn't have to trade up. They're going to keep both of their first-round picks. You can see on the screen they've got number 11 and 23. They're going to take J.J. McCarthy. They lost Kirk Cousins. They need a quarterback. They probably overreach a little bit for a quarterback, but they take McCarthy ahead of Denver, who also needs a quarterback.
If McCarthy is the play, and I've heard, of course, you hear everything at this point, and a lot of it's false information the week of. But if McCarthy is the guy, I would think he's probably going to be there at 11, and they don't really need to trade up.
Yeah, there's a lot of smoke around him. Maybe even the Patriots consider him at 3. The Giants might consider him at 6. And he was the ultimate game manager at Michigan because that's all he had to do. But what can he do when he goes to an offense that's not as talented as what he had at Michigan? They're not going to have the best team on the field. Can he lead them to victory? And I think that's the unknown with McCarthy.
It's funny. He reminds me of another Michigan quarterback who, actually, McCarthy has gotten more hype coming out than the Michigan quarterback I'm thinking of, who would become the GOAT, Mr. Brady. No one thought. No one had an inkling that he would be what he turned out to be. So, I don't know. It's such a crapshoot. So that puts the Broncos on the clock. They picked up Zach Wilson for basically nothing. but there's still some thought they may go quarterback, though we don't see Mr. Nix on our board here. Boy, I don't know. They have so many needs. Um, I would tend to go Mitchell, the cornerback from Toledo, because
Hmm.
they need defensive help in a big way.
They do, and there's some smoke that they may package this pick and Pat Sertan, the corner who just picked up their Fisher option, package
Mm,
that and maybe a future draft pick to try to move up and get one of those top four quarterbacks.
mm,
This range right here, Minnesota, Denver, Las Vegas, 11 through 13, all of
mm,
them need a quarterback, but you're probably reaching at this point for McCarthy or Penix or Nix. So now at Denver at 12, if they stay put and you look at what's available, and obviously they've got a lot of needs. The offensive tackle from Penn State, I'm not even going to try to attempt his name,
mm.
number 16 on the overall board. I think that would
Yeah.
probably go a long way of protecting whatever quarterback it's going to be for next year.
So you're going to go with the lineman from Penn State to the
Yeah.
Raiders, which makes sense. I mean, everybody talks about, well, you need quarterbacks and all this, but yeah, you got to have the infrastructure around him to have success.
Mm-hmm.
And, a lot of these guys, like Caleb Williams, he may or may not work. Chicago's been like a death trap for quarterbacks.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's tough. So that puts the Saints, who are really a mystery team, they have a lot of needs. I mean, you just so many ways. You go with the rusher. I go with Murphy out of Texas. I just think he's gonna be what the doctor ordered for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which moves us to the Colts at 15. Anthony Richardson played just a few games last year. You were able to re-sign Michael Pittman, the receiver, so you've got some offense there. But again, you kind of like what I said with the Titans. You've seen the Texans get so much better offensively. You've got to have
Mm-hmm.
defense. You got to be able to get after the quarterback. So I think they go Jared Verse, the defensive end, outside linebacker from Florida State. I think that makes a lot of sense. Helps shore up that defense.
Yeah, that's. I mean, because that division. That's the thing too. You want to draft for a playoff run, but some of these teams are in divisions where I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you got to get out of your division before you even worry about going on to the next level. So,
Yeah.
man, so that puts the Seahawks, who are in an interesting time. Pete Carroll's gone. The GM's got more power. Mike McDonald is your head coach. He's a defensive guy. So I got to think he's going to go with the defensive edge man out of UCLA, defensive coach, going to lean defense, right?
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. I mean, you've got to rebuild. At some point, obviously, the Legion of Boom was a long time ago. We're talking that's been a decade since we saw that. You got to shore up that side of the ball. Now, Jacksonville at 17. I mean, they're a team that has been knocking on the door for the last couple of years, and is Trevor Lawrence going to be that guy, your quarterback of the future? You lose Calvin Ridley. And as your explosive playmaker on the outside, so I think Jacksonville goes offense. Fuaga from Oregon State might make some sense, but you got to replace that production on the outside. So Brian Thomas, the receiver from LSU, who's the highest rated receiver available at this point,
Mm-hmm.
I think that they got to give Trevor Lawrence another weapon, so they go Thomas Jr. at LSU.
Yeah, he's an intriguing prospect. I heard Brian Kelly talking on Cowherd the other day about that. And then some scouts have said, yeah, he's fast, he's a burner, but he's not a great route runner. But you never
Mm-hmm.
know. So much too is what is the team culture these guys are going into.
Right.
I mean, would Patrick Mahomes be what he is had he gone to the Saints or somewhere else? I mean,
Yeah,
it's
development and
crazy.
coaching matter. The development and coaching matter a whole lot more than a lot of people give credit to in the NFL, because we've seen a lot of really good players from the college game get to an NFL spot where you think, okay, this is a perfect fit for them, and all of a sudden they fall on their face. I mean, it happens a lot with quarterback, but
Hmm.
offensive linemen, secondary members. I mean, it happens at every position. Quarterbacks just get the headlines.
Well, and you think about guys who you never heard of in college, and
Mm-hmm.
Austin Eckler comes to mind. I mean, no one had any idea, and he was a great player. So bless you. So That puts the Bengals on the clock. They've gone through some changes. Um, I forget. Is this? Oh, it's. I'm the one picking, right? Or is it
Yep,
you?
you're the odd,
Okay,
you're the evens.
that's right. Math is so hard. Boy, yeah, you see a lot of tackles. And
Mm-hmm.
this is. I think this is a point where tackles are going to go, and it makes sense because I mean, let's face it, Burrow is injury prone, so you do want to have as much protection around him as possible.
Yep.
I think Latham's got the most upside of anybody. I would go with him. I just, Alabama linemen seem to work out pretty well.
Yeah. You think about what T. Higgins has asked for a trade, even though he's come out and said he expects to play there. You're going to have to pay Jamar Chase pretty soon. Tyler Boyd, he's getting a little older. Would not shock me to see them go receiver just to kind of play ahead of the game. And maybe
Mm-hmm.
if a receiver falls to you, if you're Cincinnati, then you can go ahead and trade Higgins for a future pick. But I'm with you. You take offensive line, got to protect your franchise. So we go to the Rams first round
Wow.
pick for the Rams since 2016. First time in 8 years.
Jeez.
They're picking here, and you got to start thinking about the future. Again, this is
Mm-hmm.
probably a reach, but things are starting to fall into place for them. And
Yeah.
so I think they scroll all the way down to 34, and I think they pull the trigger and take Bo Nix. I think that's a
Oh.
quarterback that can sit for a year behind Matthew Stafford, learn the NFL game, start to develop a deeper passing game. I think the Rams, especially if the board falls this way, sitting pretty to take a quarterback at 19.
Well, let me ask you this on Bo Nix, and there's some thought that Denver may still go for him.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know. Sean Payton. I mean, he's one of those guys you trust his judgment on quarterbacks. He may be able to get Zach Wilson going. Bo Nix is 24. Does that concern you at all, or is that an
No, not really.
overreaction?
I think it's an overreaction. To me, what would concern me with Nix and why I'm not high on him is his completion percentage of throws to 10 yards or
Mm-hmm.
more.
Yeah.
At a college in a college game where it's easier to throw than it is in the NFL. But why I like the situation of maybe if he goes to New Orleans or obviously him to the Rams, you go to a place where a coach who knows to get the most. Drew Brees didn't have a cannon arm, but Sean Payton was able to get a lot out of him. That's why him to Denver will not make a lot of sense. You sit behind Stafford, maybe you soak that information
Mm-hmm.
in, you learn how to push the ball down the field. Because I want to say he was like under 5 yards was his average completion
Mm-hmm.
yardage at Oregon this year. So just they don't push the ball down the field, so that worries me a little bit, which is the complete opposite of how I feel about Michael Penix, who's got a bullet
Mm-hmm.
arm
A
and can make
cannon.
all the throws. Honestly, if I was ranking my quarterbacks, and we didn't talk about this in the beginning, if I was going 1-2, Jane
Mm-hmm.
Daniels would be my number one quarterback, and I'd have Penix at number 2. I know he's 24; he's had some injuries in the past, but you watch the film, you watch him against Texas, the team in the college football playoff. He was really, really impressive. He didn't have any time to throw the ball against Michigan, so he couldn't see it against that level. But he was really, really good against Texas.
I don't understand why the age is such a. I mean, yeah, it'd be nice if they're 21, but if they're getting their brains beat in when they're
Yeah.
21, 22, 23, I don't know if they're mature enough to handle it as, say, a 24-year-old who's going
Mm-hmm.
to have to command a locker room. Plus, I mean, are these guys really going to. I mean, if you get 10 years out of them, I mean, anything after
You hit
that's
a
a
home run.
bonus anyway, right?
Yeah, I mean,
So,
honestly, you're judged more. Obviously, we're in the microwave mentality of we've got to
mhm.
find out what we have now. If a player gets a second contract from the team they drafted, that means they hit a home run on a draft day,
Yeah.
and that's really how things are judged. And so, if any of these quarterbacks re-sign or get a max deal from the team that they're with, I mean, that means they hit a home run on that draft day.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
right now, like the Dolphins haven't even reassured Tua that they're gonna give him that huge contract.
Yeah. Well, and that's a decision that, yeah, they're going to have to make.
Mm-hmm.
So the Steelers on the clock now at 20. Say they go Mr. Robinson. I mean, they're just a defensive culture. So I'm going to think they take the edge guy out of Penn State. How fitting, sell some more merchandise.
Yeah. I think defensive front, offensive front would make a lot of sense. They take the offensive tackle in the first round last year, so maybe they don't go back to back years. Either one would make a lot of sense. Obviously, they got Russell Wilson. They've got Justin Fields now at quarterback.
Hmm.
You might think about helping him out up front. So that takes us to 21, the aforementioned Dolphins. I mentioned the uncertainty with Tua. They've lost a lot on the offensive line. They lost some on the defensive line. I think they can go a lot of ways, but because they lose Christian Wilkins in free agency, I think they go Jerson Newton, the Brett Bielema product at 24 overall, the defensive lineman from Illinois. I think they try to replace that up the middle. Obviously it's a division that's wide open. You're talking about a team with Buffalo that gets rid of Diggs. You don't know how good they are. 24 overall is where I've got Newton. Should be back there in the middle of your screen.
There it is. Yeah.
I think that's where Miami goes. I think they go D front.
Well, that makes sense, and it's kind of interesting. You mentioned, talked about Tua. There was Penix lurking on the draft board too. I mean, the Dolphins have a lot of decisions to make, so it's going to be intriguing to see how that plays out. The Eagles, a team that has drafted very well. They've got some holes, obviously, on the line. Mr. Kelsey's gone.
And they love Georgia.
Yeah, they do. But I think, man, Kool-Aid's still there. I think you grab him. I mean, he's the Alabama cornerbacks. I mean, moving forward, I don't know. But that was Saban's area of expertise, so I'm going to trust a guy that he coached.
Yeah. So that brings us to Minnesota at 23. They've already drafted a quarterback at 11. And so, again, if the board follows this way, I think somebody trades in with Minnesota to take Penix. We're not doing trades in this one. So you look at Minnesota. Okay, what do we have to do? The uncertainty with Jefferson and hasn't signed a long-term deal. You got a young quarterback now. They've got two really good receivers. And so this is where the question is, okay, do we feel like we can lock up Justin Jefferson long-term, which I think is priority number one. You've already got Addison. You've got a tight end in Hawkinson. You got to protect him. So I go Amarius Mims, the offensive lineman from Georgia, who's number 22 on the board.
Okay.
You take him, you protect your quarterback, you've got the skill players, and now the rebuild's a little bit faster, even though you lost your quarterback in Kirk Cousins.
Makes sense. Oh, now the drama-filled Dallas Cowboys are on the board. They've been all in on free agency, which means they've signed nobody. The Cowboys are hard to do a mock draft because they don't fall to convention. They kind of do their own thing. They like to re-sign guys that they draft, even if they're not great. The whole Dak question, they want to pay him $50 million. It's always something. You've got the offensive tackle from Oregon who's fallen. DeJean, pretty salty cornerback. I don't know. I think you take the offensive tackle. You've got to protect whoever your quarterback is for now, Dak, or long term. I just don't know that you can go wrong with offensive tackles.
Yep, I agree with you 100%. Now, Green Bay is sitting at 25. They're sitting pretty. I think this is where that secondary run of offensive linemen and receivers come into play. Obviously, Watson started to show a little talent on the outside last year. Jordan Love started to look pretty good, especially in the playoffs last year at quarterback. Maybe you go out and give him a little more help. Maybe you go out and get who some people think is that number 3 receiver in the draft. I think Adonai Mitchell at 28 overall is the wide receiver out of Texas. I know he didn't put the blazing 40 time on film like Worthy did at the combine, but I think he's the best target available, and I think Green Bay snatches him.
That's one thing that people don't. You look at the quarterback succession. Now, granted, they traded and got far, but then they drafted Rodgers. Then they drafted Love. The Packers do a great job of drafting and developing. And so, you got to roll with them. So that brings us to Tampa Bay. Always interesting. What are they going to do? Probably need to find a way to protect. But, man, DeJean's still on the board. I would grab him for the secondary.
All right. So Arizona, second pick in the first round. I've already taken Malik Neighbors, their wide receiver. You've mentioned it a couple times. Got to find a way to protect. Kyler Murray, is he their quarterback? Is he the player of the future? I think you've got to find a way to protect him. Obviously, he's had some injuries in his career. I think they re-dipped in the well from Oklahoma. I think they go the offensive tackle, Tyler Guyton, slide him into that offense. It's an offense that's pretty similar with the Cardinals' run, so he's going to be used to protecting 30 to 40 times a game.
Yeah, I've read some interesting stuff on him. A lot of potential. Think he hasn't even scratched the surface yet. So that will be interesting to see how that plays out. So that brings us to the Bills. And the Bills, wow, what an offseason they've had. They've jettisoned a lot of veterans to cut salary cap. Uh, Mr. Diggs is gone. They need some weapons, but they also need to keep their quarterback upright. They have they have a lot of needs. Man, I can't believe Penix is still on the board. I don't
Well,
know that you go for him, but let's see. I I think he'd take a chance on Worthy out of Texas. He had the big fast time at the combine, turned some heads. You need a speed guy to replace Diggs, who you've shipped off to Houston. So and Allen needs some weapons. That offense
yeah,
has got to get going.
exactly. And not only with Diggs, you got to remember Gabe Davis left in free agency too.
That's
And
true.
so they've got some serious holes. They've got two really good tight ends, but they've got to go receiver. I think Worthy is the pick that makes a ton of sense there.
Yeah.
For Detroit at 29, the offense has just been cruising. I mean, they're so good. They took a big step forward defensively last year, but I think they've got to continue to improve that. You look at the board that's available here, I really do think they would probably trade out. Now, this
Mm-hmm.
is going to be really interesting. 29 through 32, all these teams are set at quarterback, especially with the way our board's fallen. I think someone would take an early second round, trade back into the first round, so
Mm-hmm.
they have the potential for that fifth year option on these players, especially if you're going to go up and get a quarterback. So if you see someone like Penix is falling, you can maybe trade back into 29 to 32 to get that fifth year, get your quarterback. But
Mm-hmm.
for Detroit, I think they know that hey, we've got to get after the passer in the playoffs. We got to go find somebody who can disrupt. You look at the board: Darius Robinson from Mizzou, Edgerrin Cooper from Texas A&M. I think they go Cooper again. I think they trade out in what's going to happen Thursday night, but they're going to go Cooper, who's number 40 overall,
Okay.
the linebacker from Texas A&M.
Makes sense. And I like the way that the Lions have built their team through the draft. They've done a really
Mm-hmm.
nice job of player
When they just
development.
re-signed literally today, right before we jumped on, they gave a big contract extension to Panay Sewell. They've
Oh,
already given
nice.
an extension to Amon-Ra St. Brown. The extension for Jared
Ooh,
Goff's coming, so they're
yes.
kind of keeping their own. But they've also got to get younger because all these big contract extensions means you got to get younger on cheaper salary.
Yeah. But they've kind of got their window of opportunity now the next 4 or 5 years, probably max. So we'll
Yeah,
see what happens there. The Ravens, boy, I like the pickup of Mr. Henry
yeah.
adding to that offense. Oh my goodness, that's just nasty. Um, the Ravens have some needs. I think Wiggins. I know the offensive tackle of Washington. You always need linemen, but I think Wiggins. I mean, defense in Baltimore is going to be
Yeah.
key.
Now you're looking at San Francisco. I mean, a team that's loaded, but they're getting older, and that's the one thing you got to pay attention to. Obviously, they've had a ton of injuries, whether it's at tight end, which there's really only one good tight end on the board in this year's draft, in Bowers. Obviously, Debo Samuel's been banged up a lot. So do you go
Mm-hmm.
receiver? Do you go playmaker? I think McConkey, I think Franklin is a reach at this point, but I do think they need to get younger more explosive on the outside. So to me, this comes down between Keon Coleman from Florida State or Xavier Leggett. Leggett's more of the big body type receiver, a physical player, which is what San Francisco really likes. And I think that's why they would go Leggett here, who's 41st overall on the draft board. I think San Francisco might reach a little bit just to get that fifth year option for him. Again, an option to trade out, but I think they try to get younger at the receiving court. Also
Yeah,
with Brandon Ayuk, who a lot of people think is going to get traded this weekend.
yeah, that's going to be the interesting thing. What do they do? Do they use that to to maneuver draft picks or
Mm-hmm.
whatnot? It's this draft is going to be wild because there are
Yeah.
just so many scenarios and then what we're going to do. So the Super Bowl champion Chiefs, obviously we need a wide receiver. I don't know that there's anybody in that group that just jumps out at me though. There's some thought the Chiefs could trade down. There's some
Mm-hmm.
thoughts the Chiefs could trade up. Veach has historically made a trade to move up in the past. I don't know how much they can. I almost think you're better off if there's some linebackers you'd like, see, that's the problem with drafted 32. But you are the Super Bowl champion, so it's got its
Mhm.
downside. You need some help, but you can never do without linemen. And maybe if the big OT from Washington's still there, I think you draft him
Yeah, I think
because
that's a
you
good
got to
pick
protect
just because of the
Mahomes.
value. Yeah, just the
Yes.
value of that draft pick. I mean, you're talking somebody who a lot of people thought was probably going to go to 15 through 20, and if he's available at 32, again, you're going to get a lot of calls at 32 with Penix available. Teams trying to
Yes.
get back up there, and if we can take a look at the full
Yes.
recap, what would
Yes.
really jump out to me is if you're Denver, if you're Oakland, or excuse me, Las Vegas. Now Denver doesn't have a second round pick, and this is where things could really hurt them.
Uh-huh.
But if you're the Raiders and if you've got a second round pick and I don't have the full sheet ahead of me, maybe you trade up from wherever you are in the second round back to 32 to get Penix there, or
Mm-hmm.
so you get the fifth year option, and you also get your quarterback, which you definitely weren't going to expect that he was going to be available at the end of the first round.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you on Caleb Williams. Do you think it's pretty much a foregone conclusion he's going to go number one? But do you think he'll be
Yeah.
successful in Chicago?
Yeah,
Do
it's going to be really interesting. But I think what the Bears have done, though, in the offseason has at least set him up for the potential to be successful.
mm-hmm.
The second half of the season, Justin Fields played pretty well, and they
Yeah.
were a competitive team down the stretch. Now, the offensive line's terrible, and that's why I
Yes.
think that they may go tackle at 9 if they stay in that spot because they were really, really bad up front. But you trade for Keenan Allen, you pick up DeAndre Swift, the running back, and so you've got some weapons. And so at least the foundation is potentially there. And
Mm-hmm.
is Keenan Allen going to be a 110 reception guy for you? Probably not, because you don't have Justin Herbert, and Keenan Allen is getting a little bit older, but he's still a really, really good player. Cole Kmet's a really, really good tight end. So you've got weapons in the backfield, now on the edges, now down the middle. So I think he potentially could be successful. Does he have it between the ears? You've heard a lot of stories and maybe some drama with the workouts this summer and how he only scheduled one visit to a team. Like he
Mm-hmm.
literally only went and saw the Bears. Um,
Yeah.
to me, this draft gets interesting when the Commanders turn in their pick at 2. Because
Yes.
there's still some smoke that Daniels wasn't happy with how his visit went to the Commanders
Mm.
and how they didn't bring him in individually. They brought him in with the other running
Yeah. Which
backs.
was odd,
And then,
but
yeah, which is odd. And so maybe his agent convinces them not to take him. It's like, hey, he didn't want to play for you. And so maybe they go Drake May. And then obviously, I think New England wants to trade down. I really do, but I don't know if somebody's going to come up with that asking price. I floated this out there to our good friend Dave yesterday and one of my other good NFL buddies. I think the Patriots trade down 3-6.
mm-hmm.
They trade for the Giants, and then they trade down 6 to 11 or 12, probably 12 to the Broncos, and you take an offensive tackle. But in that turn, you get the second round pick from the Giants plus number 6. You flip that for 12. You get number 12 and Pat Surtain, the defensive back, who they just picked up the fifth-year option. So now you've got a corner. You take an offensive tackle. You've got 2 picks in the first 15 of the second round. Take those picks, trade up late first round, you get Penix. That's what I think the perfect scenario for my team. Obviously, I've done a lot of research into this. I think the
Yeah.
Patriots can make multiple trades tomorrow night.
If you can get if you see the quarterback of the future and can get
Mm-hmm.
him, there's not a rule that says you have to play him this year. I think, in a
That's right.
sense, you're better off letting him sit behind Brissett, I believe, is the quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
Let him sit behind a veteran and learn for a year. Look how that paid off for Mahomes. I mean,
Agreed,
if you
100%.
get, yeah, why throw him to the wolves and end up like David Carr, who's
Yeah,
no one
that's why if you're the
remembers?
Patriots, you go back and sign Jacoby Brissett because you want that
Yes,
security blanket.
yes. All right. There's our mock draft. We'll post it shortly. Man, final words.
I'm ready for tomorrow night. Can't get here fast enough.